Wife caught cheating with student. Now she's in big trouble. My wife Vera is a teacher in an all-male evening class, and tonight was the last night of the year. Traditionally, the last night is party night, and tonight was to be no exception. She had never failed to intrigue me in the past, telling me stories about the men in the class. One in particular who not only constantly asked her out for drinks, but was perhaps the most lecherous. Although they were all a little naughty in their innuendos and banter, often to the point of being lewd, if not almost obscene. But she liked it, and usually fought back when she felt she could get away with it. She was also something of a tease, because every week she would tell me how she sat on the edge of her desk so the class could see her skirt, because she always sat with her legs slightly apart, and she usually wore skirts with a slit, and that slit was usually in the front. Sometimes she even wore fishnet tights instead of nylon tights, because she said fishnets didn't hide her legs as much, and they could always tell the color of her underwear. But there was to be a party tonight, and she decided that she would wear stockings and suspenders for fun. She said she wanted to give men a better view of her thighs and asked me to help her choose an outfit, so I was fully aware of her intentions. "I'm also wondering if I should accept an invitation for a drink afterward," she said. "I think you should," I told her, "in which case I now know what you should wear." "Then remember I'm going to wear stockings and suspenders," she laughed. "I remember," said I to her. I then went to her closet and pulled out an extremely short mini-skirt that she usually only wore on holidays as an alternative to a sundress. It was so short and tight that it barely covered her crotch when she wore it on vacation, but she usually wore matching panties underneath, giving the impression of a tailored outfit. "They'll be able to see the top of my stockings and even my suspenders if I'm not sitting on the table," she sighed. "And they can almost see my underwear when I move." "I know. That's why I don't think you should wear underwear at all." She looked at me with an expression I found hard to understand. Then, with an equally mischievous grin, looked me straight in the eye and said, "That's right. I'm playing. Only if you realize that was your offer." "No bra either," I added. "But you can wear this top." And I handed her another of her vacation clothes, a halter top with a plunging neckline at the waist and no back, made of sheer thin lace that allowed her breasts to be seen and meant she could usually only wear it indoors when we were alone. She looked at me again with that strange look and then said, "I might as well be completely naked. They'll all see everything most of the time. And how dare I go out for a drink looking like that? First of all, what would John think? And secondly, how would I get into the pub looking like that?" "I suppose John would be delighted if you accepted his invitation looking like that," I laughed. "I can see you'll get a good thrashing from him at the very least, and if you don't, you shouldn't go drinking with him." She laughed in turn. "In that case, I think you'd better be in bed when I get home, or you might get upset about what I might be up to." I laughed and then said, "Quite sincerely, you're free to do whatever you want, and I sincerely promise that whatever you do will be the exact opposite of what will upset me. It will excite me." Eventually, she dressed in the outfit I had chosen, threw on a rather long coat, and explained that John would probably want to drive her home in his car, so she wouldn't be taking hers this time. So I drove her to the college in my car so that her outfit wouldn't catch the eye of anyone she might meet on the way, and dropped her off with a kiss and another assurance that whatever she decided to do this evening would have my full blessing. It was well past midnight when I heard the front door open. I crept toward the stairs when I heard her loudly say, "It's okay, John. He sleeps like a log as soon as he gets into bed. Nothing will disturb him." We have two lights in the hall, a soft one that usually stays on most of the time, and a very bright fluorescent one that we only use when we're doing some work in there. And so, as if to emphasize her importance, she turned the bright light on full blast. Her hair was disheveled, and except for her high-heeled shoes, she was completely unclothed. In the bright light, I could see that her back was covered in patches of something dark, probably dirt, and one of her breasts was covered in the same layer. "Thank you for a wonderful evening, John," she was saying. "I know we only had one drink, but it wasn't worth wasting time drinking if it meant we could spend more time having sex. I'm almost all sore from the way we did it. But remember that in the future, all you have to do is ask, and my body will be yours. If my husband answers the phone, tell him you are John from night class, and you have a little problem. He will call for me, and then you can say whatever you want. He won't hear you because he always leaves me alone on the phone as if he shouldn't be eavesdropping. But could you have sex with me one more time before you leave?" "I'm sorry, honey, but I'm tired. I don't think I have any energy left in me. Let's save that for another time, in the distant future, say tomorrow night." As they talked, his hand stroked her body quite gently, and her hand groped surreptitiously at his pants. When they parted, she looked directly at him, still holding his waist, and asked, "How would you like me to dress tomorrow? Or would you rather come here so that I can look perfectly uncovered when I open the door to you without a long coat, in which I have to go out in the street, as I have to this evening? My husband won't be here until early in the morning, and we can make love for as long as we want before you go home to your own wife." "In that case, I'll leave it up to you how you dress," he replied. "Only that I can see and taste your body whenever I want, as we did tonight. But I have to go now. My wife thinks I'm at a friend's house playing cards, but I have to go home. See you tomorrow then, Faith." And they hugged and French kissed again. But eventually they had to part, and after one last glance at a disheveled Faith, he walked back to his car. Faith stood in the doorway, fully lit for his convenience, though he knew he couldn't see her from the road because of the curve and the trees lining the road. As soon as he rounded the corner, she closed the door and, without raising her eyes to me, said, "You can come down now. I want another drink while I tell you the whole story of tonight." I followed her into the living room, where she poured me a large shot of whiskey and herself an even larger shot of gin. She didn't try to cover herself, though I don't know why she would do that after putting herself out there like she did for John. "Now sit down. But don't touch me until I finish my story, or I won't be able to remember all the details, and I want to tell you every single one." I sat down across from her, and although she caressed her body as she told me the story, I never once tried to touch her until she was finished. "I came in wearing a long coat, as you know," she began, "and just as I entered the classroom, I met John, the man who had repeatedly invited me for drinks after class. He invited me again, and I told him that since it was the last night I would accept, but there were conditions. When he asked what they were, I told him that first he had to make sure he was seated at the very beginning of class. I also made it clear that no one could know that we would be going out for a drink together afterward, no matter how great the temptation, hinting that he might want to brag about it. When he asked me why I thought so, I told him as cryptically as I could that, since it was party night, things might be said that might change the relationship between teacher and student. I stayed in my long coat until the rest of the students came in, although 3 of them sent their apologies since they had already started their vacation. John did as commanded and took a seat in the front center. Then I went around the classroom and said, "As you know, tonight is Let Your Hair Down night, and I intend to do just that. You all should know that I have always been keenly aware of the fact that when I sat down at my desk, you all did your best to look up my skirt. Every single one of you. And I always let you do it. Now, since this is the last night, as a special treat, I'm wearing stockings instead of pantyhose, so nothing will get in the way of my panties tonight, but I must insist that you all stay in your seats until I allow someone to stand up. Agreed?" They all agreed, their smug smirks indicating that they thought they were ahead of me and would be able to get a proper look at my underwear. Soon I was to prove them wrong. I told them the coat would stay on me for now. I heard them whispering about stockings and suspenders rather than hold-ups, and inwardly I laughed at the fact that they would soon see more of me than anyone else but you. Anyway, I said we'll have one last class, albeit a much shorter one than before, after which we'll eat our birthday cakes and share a couple bottles of wine I've provided. I will then ask them all to write down an answer to a simple question, after which I will give the answer and take off my coat. But in doing so, they had to make a promise that none of them would tell anyone else about what might happen in this class this evening. They all agreed, a little reticent, but with obvious impatience to see me take off my coat. I summarized what we had been doing for the semester, then asked John, who was sitting closest, to pour the wine for everyone else, and asked Mike to pass out the cakes, which were stacked on one large plate. Once we had all eaten, I asked everyone to get out a pen or pencil and a piece of paper for the last question I would ask, and then take off their coats when I gave the correct answer. Now they all looked a little impatient, and the pens and paper were immediately retrieved, and they all looked up in anticipation of my question. When it sounded, there were loud laughs and instant hurried scribbling, because the question I asked them was, "What color do you think my underwear is?" I gathered the papers, looked through them, then laid them on the table, after which, very deliberately, I unbuttoned my coat, but held it in my hands until, with one movement of my shoulders, I dropped the coat to the floor, exposing myself in an exceptionally short skirt and revealing to their incredulous gazes stockings and suspenders and an almost non-existent sheer lace top. I reminded them of their promise not to move without my permission, and then told them to watch carefully, and two things would now happen. First, I would sit down in front of them in the exact same pose I had sat in every class all last semester, and then I would sit down so they could see who had correctly guessed the color of my underwear. For a few seconds, I stood motionless, while they all stirred in anticipation, though none of them could have guessed exactly what they were about to see. Then, with both hands firmly on the table behind me, I placed not only my body but both legs spread apart in front of me on the table in one swift backward jerk. Not only did I show them that I was wearing no underwear, but I also flaunted something they in no way expected to see. Then I reminded them again that they could only move with my permission, although each of them was now rummaging around under the table, presumably caressing their bodies. They nodded in agreement as best they could, almost rolling their eyes, and then I said again that since it was the last night of the semester and we were nearing the end of class, I would allow them to leave one by one as soon as I called them out of their seats. They immediately looked at me as if none of them wanted to leave, but I grinned, continuing that this meant that if they appreciated me as a teacher during the semester, then I would allow myself some indulgence and not report any of them if they decided to steal a kiss. After all, you were a great class, I praised them. I then started calling their names one by one to say goodnight, but added that no arm should be wrapped around my neck. "This kissing position is for my husband only," I explained, "but anywhere else is taboo, which means your hands can be anywhere," I added cheekily, hoping they would get my meaning. And they did. I called the first name, and Mike readily moved towards me. He kissed me, and his hand hesitantly touched my exposed thigh. I grabbed his hand with mine to run it up my body. Eventually, I pulled away and wished him good night, reminding him that others were waiting their turn, which was enough of a hint to tell him he'd gotten his share for tonight. He left, vowing that he would join my class again next semester. I must admit that they all obeyed my wishes very well. Even though each of them had received a good portion of caresses, they made no move to go any further, and they all obediently left without making a fuss, even though I was very horny by then. It was like that until it was John's turn, whom I purposely left for last. Since he was the only one left in the room, I was able to talk to him more frankly, telling him that he should leave in a minute or so that the others wouldn't get suspicious about our arrangements. I would have a drink with him, I told him, but I have other needs besides drinking, and he doesn't need to use alcohol to get my inhibitions down, as he could see. But then I told him that since he would probably want to kiss me later, he couldn't kiss me on the lips, but he could do it anywhere else if he wished. "On one condition," he objected. "You have to tell me where you want me to kiss you." I knew he just wanted me to say naughty things, so I teased him. "You can kiss either my breasts or my body," I told him. but it was impossible to continue flirting in class, which I reluctantly had to tell him. Another teacher or even the janitor could poke his head out from behind the door at any moment, and in any case, he would have to be seen leaving the classroom alone to continue playing out the act for the benefit of the rest of the students who were probably still hanging around outside. "Now go," I told him. "Leave, and then come back for me when the others think you've left. I'll be in the parking lot in my long coat." He smiled in agreement and walked out, and I could hear him talking to the others outside, but I trusted that they would remain completely silent about what had happened that evening. I put on my coat, left the room, and said good night to the strange encounter, and then walked out into the parking lot. Soon I heard a car pulling in, not out like most cars, and assumed it was John. It turned out to be, and he chivalrously got out of the car to open the passenger door for me. "I suppose you're hoping I'll give you another view of my body when I get in the car," I laughed. "I'm sorry. There are too many people around right now, but as soon as I get in the car, I'll unbutton my coat all the way for you." I kept my word. As soon as he pulled out of the parking lot, I unbuttoned my coat all the way and tossed it aside, whereupon his eyes began to roam over my body. I quickly pulled my coat back into place, censuring him slightly but laughing nonetheless. "You should watch the road," I scolded him. "Let's go for a drink, for that's what I promised my husband, to take you up on your offer of a drink, and I wouldn't want to cheat him, would I?" So I told him to turn off to the nearest pub, have a drink, and then find somewhere where we could have some privacy and not disturb each other, as I was too hot in my coat and I could leave my coat in the car. I told him that if we found a private place, he could do whatever he wanted to me. He gave me a perplexed look at this remark, but turned into his parking lot as we neared the pub. I naturally left my coat behind and we ordered drinks. Finding a quiet corner, we sat down in it, sipping our drinks. "I'm in a big hurry," I told him quietly so I wouldn't be overheard. "I want you to take off everything I'm wearing as soon as we get to where we're going. But I naturally won't take off my coat until we get out of here." He agreed, and we couldn't finish our drinks fast enough, and despite the fact that I could be seen, I also took off my coat before getting into the car, providing John with another flash of stockings and suspenders. Once in the car, he wasted no time in driving off as soon as I said, "Okay, take me where we're going as fast as you can." We hadn't gone more than a mile when he turned onto a side path, something resembling a farm entrance, but overlooking a field with a high hedge. He skillfully stopped the car quite close to this hedge, so that it was not at all visible from the road. As you know, it was a full moon, and so we didn't need any light at all. So he turned off the car headlights and we were completely alone in that meadow, yet we could see the other person quite clearly. "Tear them off if you can't fasten them," I ordered him, and as he started to pull off my lace top with the halter neckline, I helped him by unzipping the zipper on my skirt and tossing it aside. Now I was only wearing stockings and suspenders. I'd taken my shoes off while still in the car before I got out, so I just fell backwards, ignoring the mud I'd fallen into. John wasted no time undressing himself, and before I knew it, he was on top of me and starting to have sex with me. I ended up encouraging him more than almost any other man could handle. I finally offered to get up and move on, but reminded him that I was still wearing stockings and a suspender belt. I told him to be as rough as possible, and again, try to literally rip off whatever I was still wearing. It hurt a lot when he pulled the belt with force, but it gave way and he tossed it aside with the rest of my clothes. I told him I was perfectly willing to be driven back in my dirty but naked state, explaining that all the dirt stuck to me would be protected by my coat from his padding, although for his sake I would not wear it, only use it to protect his car. He seemed reluctant to get back in the car, but I assured him that he wouldn't lose anything as I intended to do, please him while he drove. So he partially dressed himself to look decent once we were on the road. And I left all my clothes where they lay in the field, as they were useless, having become nothing more than rags after the treatment they had undergone. I spread my coat out on the seat and leaned back, then leaned over to comfort John. Unfortunately, We didn't encounter any other transportation on the way back, or I wouldn't have been able to resist trying to expose myself even more to whoever was in the other car. Anyway, when we got home and pulled up to the house to park, I told him that a gentleman always opens the door for a lady, especially if she is completely naked and about to get out of the car. He rushed to my door and opened it, then deliberately stared at my body, and I took great pleasure in flaunting my body to him. We had sex again right in front of my house. Afterward, however, he seemed satisfied enough to walk me to the door, promising that I would definitely see him again tomorrow night. Or was it tonight, judging by the time? By this point, I was completely unable to quench my own hunger for her, and all it took was one tug from my pajama pants to fall down, and I made love to my wife. When we finally subsided, she was lying there panting and saying that she had had a good time in every sense. I don't remember much else because we both fell into a deep sleep almost immediately, completely exhausted. The end! Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.